Hi, I'm Nicole Reilley, and we are doing a five-part series called Living Easter Every Day. We are starting a week late. It's been crazy, but here we are. So Easter is an important season in the church. Of course, Easter speaks the truth of God's love and how God's love is so large for all creation that God came among us in Jesus. While Jesus was here, he taught us how to live. And in his death, he took on the weight of our brokenness, our sin. And he did this so that we might live in a close relationship with God, so that we might have a bigger life. This is important, especially in times like this. It can feel very small right now if we are without work, if we are dealing with financial issues, if we are home alone, if we are dealing with the same routine every day. You may even be losing track of the days. It's easy to do. I have a pet turtle. Her name is Ava, and I always know when she's having a bad day because she kind of pulls into herself. We all do that sometimes. We pull into ourselves. But Easter is what reminds us that God has a bigger life for us. And that bigger life is not about doing more things. It's this call for more is about living in a bigger way. One of my favorite books is Simple Christianity by N.T. Wright. And he says that there are four things that we were created to do, that we were called to do, bigger things that we are to turn our lives to. And the first is justice. Justice is a bigger thing, and justice is an important thing, especially for us as people of faith. As God's people, we are called to take a stand. We are called to stand with those who are oppressed, to those who suffer, and with all those in need, even when it costs us. So justice is an important thing that we are called to, one of the bigger things in life. The second thing we're called to is relationship. It is really my ongoing prayer during this time as we are with our families at home, that it would be a time of deepening relationships. But for some of us, it's a time of stress. It is easy to be caught up in our own insecurities and fears in these times. But we are called to relationship. It's one of the bigger things to which we are called. And in times like this, I think especially. Third thing that is a little bigger that we are called to is spirituality. Spirituality is really a lot bigger. It's the inner life. And it's that inner life that enables us to stand in the midst of difficult times. I think we all feel this call to have a strong inner core, to not only hear sermons about forgiveness, but to actually, learn how to forgive and to take those steps. The fourth thing that N.T. Wright talks about in his book, The Bigger Things That We Are Called to, is he calls it the fragility of life. I might call it beauty instead. The idea here is that we're called to deal with and kind of reconcile these ideas around how temporary life is. Even in the little things, right? Our children, they grow up. Everyone grows older. Even the beautiful flowers that I'm starting to pick from my garden have a very limited span of time. One of the bigger things that we are called to is to deal with the fact that life is fleeting. So these are the four areas: justice, relationships, our inner life, and the fleeting nature of life, or the fragility of life. These are the places that we are called to live a bigger life. And that bigger life begins in us this Easter. This is the plan that God had for us on that first Easter, that we as the church would embrace this call to live a bigger life. The shorthand way that I talk about this is a phrase that comes from the Message paraphrase of the Bible, and it's called the wide open life. So let me read you a text. This is 2 Corinthians 6, 11b through 13, the Message translation. I can't tell you how much I long for you to enter this wide open, spacious life. We didn't fence you in. The smallness you feel comes from within you. Your lives aren't small, but you're living them in a small way. I'm speaking as plainly as I can and with great affection. Open up your lives, live openly and expansively. The context that Paul spoke these words are important. This wide open life, it can sound like, he was on vacation somewhere, but he was not. He was in a prison cell, at least during part of his writing. We may feel at this time that we're kind of stuck inside. Someone was saying to me the other day that they have replaced the battery in their car because their car sat so long. We yearn for a wide open life. Paul, here he was dealing with being in prison and dealing with being beaten and tortured. He was still living and calling others to live a bigger life. Paul shares how he has had hard times. He talked about how he had been jailed, he had been beaten, and he had been without food. But by the end of his text, he talks about how important it is and how we are called to, in light of Jesus' resurrection, to find that wide open space, to hear that call of God for more. Paul closes his words in one section of his writing with, he says, yet always filled with deep joy, living on handouts, yet enriching many, having nothing, yet having it all. This is the context into which Paul is calling people out of his conviction of the resurrection and his faith in Jesus. He is calling us to a big life, an expansive life, a wide open life. Now, this is not an easy life. It is not a pain-free or trouble-free life, but I do believe it is the best life to live. This week, when Easter started, so that would, by the time you're getting it, it would be 2 weeks ago, we talked about Matthew's account of the resurrection. And Matthew ended the section we read in worship by talking about that as they left the tomb, they left with fear and great joy. These things go together in this time. How do we live a wide open life and have a life where we're also safer at home? Well, I think the wide open life can be lived out of the Spirit within us, no matter where we find ourselves. The wide open life is a life where in the midst of brokenness and imperfection, in the midst of pandemic and more, we can live into the more that we were created for. So today's day one, and I'm glad that you've tuned in and been patient with me as I've worked to put things together. I want you today to look up this text that we had time with together to read, to look up this text from Corinthians, and I'll post it in the email as well, so that you might think about what it means to live a wide open life. As those first disciples had fear and great joy, they held it together. I think we can also hold together the wide open life and being safe at home. So blessings on you this day, and I'll see you tomorrow.